My name's Richard Grove. I'm the host of the Peace Revolution podcast and creator of TragedyandHope.com. TragedyandHope.com is named after a famous 1966 history book by Georgetown professor Carroll Quigley. It's called Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time. And it's a very different history than that which we're taught in public schools. So as you go through the workplace and you go through corporate life and you try to attain your goals using what you've been taught in public school, every now and then somebody brushes up against reality. I happened to encounter corruption in the corporation I worked for. I relied on rules and regulations and laws to blow the whistle and go to the SEC, and I was naive enough to send my information to a bunch of different press outlets in the mainstream media. What I discovered was that's not on their agenda. They have an agenda already in place, and if what you're blowing the whistle on doesn't fit in with that agenda, then you're going to need to learn how to create your own media, which is what I did.
Yeah, so maybe go into that aspect of what was your particular turning point for starting to get involved? You kind of touched on it a little bit as a corporate whistleblower, but maybe as a way to maybe the things you were seeing, the education aspect of it, and how that maybe get you involved in what you're doing right now in the projects.
Well, a current project like State of Mind, the Psychology of Control, goes back and has a root cause to a wake-up period where I discovered that what we're taught is not how the world works. The world kind of works through strong people saying what truth is, and it's not something objective, it's what they say it is. So you go from a reality of evidence and self-reliance and self-esteem, that's what America is built on, and you're now in, Alice in Wonderland, La La Land, where the cause and effect of laws and evidence and things that can be proven, evidentially, they go out the window, and it turns into pedantics of bureaucracy and red tape and the use of words to deny rights to individuals and to prevent individuals who want to risk their lives trying to get information to the public. Well, it just says, those people aren't worth defending. They should just be castigated and cast out of the system. Their friends and family probably just say, go get another job. Don't struggle through this. Why would you ever do this? But if you understand that truth does have a meaning, that there is such a thing as objective truth in this world, and you have the power to ask questions in your mind and find substantial answers, then you can really go out and learn anything for yourself. That's not how most people in America are brought up. We're all brought up to believe that the keys to success have to do with making a lot of money and going out and buying things, of an external nature, and it's not developing wisdom or experience for yourself. And so all of the media we create kind of, it's a reflection of the trail of breadcrumbs that I'm leaving behind as I learn stuff myself, and as an individual, I find these tools to be very useful, and through the creation of media, we can spread it around just like you guys do.
Yeah, so more of an aspect of that, you mentioned like the false dichotomy involving with the media now, and where the media is basically turned into a for-profit industry where it's become more of an idea of sensationalizing news instead of what you mentioned, truth and all that, and based on real news stories. You see more of a tide turning with independent media rising, and you just mentioned there, citizen journalism becoming more of a important tool to provide accountability.
It's a necessity. What you're talking about historically is called the Fourth Estate. I think it was Thomas Carlyle, the writer, who said, "Beyond, over yonder is the Fourth Estate. It's the media that's supposed to watch over the first three branches of government, the first three estates." So there's supposed to be this, citizens who are journalists. Journalists are people who ask the 5 W's plus how and a whole bunch of other questions to do something called investigation, something that used to be called muckraking. Well, all that sort of, work that goes into making news and finding out what's actually going on, that's not profitable. And in the last several decades, profitability has reigned as king, and all the investigative journalists have been fired. And the ones that weren't fired at that time were still already basically on a payroll where certain information is not printable. Because there are interests, there are publishers' friends, there are certain things that you just don't get printed in the New York Times or the Washington Post. And when you look into who founded the Washington Post, it goes back to this guy named Eugene Meyer, who was a chairman of a Federal Reserve Bank. He was the first president of the World Bank. He's off, the Washington Post was involved with CIA Operation Mockingbird. So, there's all these sort of incongruities or conflicts or contradictions between how reality actually is and how we're taught about it. And so I think that's something that mainstream media hasn't caught on to yet. The fact that we have technology available, and that once you notice this problem and you want it to be solved, then you can be the change that you want to see in the world. And together we are the change.
One of the things I remember mentioning in your other interview with Abby Martin, a recent interview, was a trivia method, which I found really inspiring. The method of learning stuff through what you do with tragedy and hope and all that. Maybe if you could get into that for people who may not know what that is particularly.
Let me just do something even more useful. I can explain the trivium in terms of time management, or getting things done, as they would say. When you have a mess, you have a bunch of stuff that's not identified. The process of identifying the mess that you need to clean up is picking each thing up and saying, what is this? Where does it go? Is it where it needs to be right now? And if it takes less than 2 minutes, you do it right then. If it takes more than 2 minutes, you schedule or delegate it. And before you know it, you've gotten a whole thing done. That goes with observation, identification, organization, and communication. Communication being the action, the end result, the conclusion, the judgment, the decision. This is all based on a process of reasoning. Reasoning all starts with observation using our 5 senses. It then goes through a process of identification. Then goes through organization. Some people call it logic, but it's really non-contradictory identification of that which exists that you can verify with your 5 senses. So that's basically what it is. It's very useful.
So yeah, and for anybody, which is what we try to do, promote positive messaging, any advice for people out there, who may think of going into independent media or don't want to get past the fear aspect, because it really is a barrier for people to prevent people from getting involved, because they may know what's going on, but don't want
Fear is the barrier to everything, isn't it? Fear is the barrier. They want you to be in fear because when you're in fear, you're confused, you're easily malleable by authorities who want to just plunder your rights and destroy your productivity. So fear can be conquered by a process of learning how to identify that which exists. And this process of identifying that which exists is called thinking. So thinking about that which you fear brings you to a point where you have knowledge. Knowledge helps dissipate that fear and uncertainty and confusion and lets you plan your life. And because human beings, we have to plan for the future. That's how we survive. We don't have the same capabilities as other animals on this planet. We are set apart by our ability to reason. That's why they spend so much time trying to get public schools to be dumbing down their students so that we don't resist it. And so when you get back to understanding how to simply find knowledge, how to simply manage your time, and how to simply manage your environment and make sure that you can get things done, those capabilities, those tools which are denied to us in schooling, can resurrect your life. It can reestablish your contact with consciousness. And so I think that's really what it's all about.
And also you run into the education aspect where it's not even education itself, that's just a euphemism. It's become an indoctrination, which you mentioned. Maybe
I think we should define it. Instead of using the word education, which is a process of learning, of unocculting or unhiding things which exist, let's talk about the schooling system, because that's really what I was picking on right there. The public schooling system, which is compulsory, which if you don't pay your property taxes, somebody with a gun comes and uses force, fraud, and aggression to extort those taxes from you. So you have a system that was created not to educate young children, but to control and to groom human resources. It's called the Prussian education system. The interesting literature on this is by a fellow named John Taylor Gatto in his famous book, The Underground History of American Education. You can find it on YouTube. Our interview with him, which is like 5 hours, which distills all his books in a chronological timeline so that you can understand who, how, why, and you can understand with a layer of simplicity very complex activities that have been going on and are ongoing, led by tax-free foundations, to de-individualize people so that they're part of a collective, that they're dependent on the state, so that they don't have self-reliance, self-esteem, or self-confidence. And when you get knowledge back, when you know how to find knowledge, when you can use knowledge as a way to dissipate fear, then you're doing everything you can to outgrow the status quo and to undermine their plans to make us all human resources.
And you touch upon that also. It's almost a quote I think I forgot from somebody, but it's more of the idea of educating people enough to just make them just smart enough to do work, but not smart enough to look at the big picture, or more of the.
That is a good quote, and it is by somebody, and I forget who it is too. No, I'm right there with you. There's another great quote by William James where he says that habit is the enormous flywheel of society, its most precious conservative agent. It alone keeps the fishermen out in the cold, doing the fishing, and people doing hard labor, coal miners doing this, and it prevents the children of the elite, from suffering the envious uprisings of the poor. So when you look at the role of psychology and education in our in our culture in America, and you ask the questions, why is America changed for the worse? They basically redefined liberty as tyranny, and people think that tyranny is liberty. And so when there's that double speak going on that Orwell warned us about, we have to then get back to what are the basics? There are human beings on this planet. I've seen human beings playing tricks on other human beings for thousands of years through history by studying the books. So that's what people use words to lie, and the suckers believe. Well, how do you stop from believing? Believing is like a rest stop on your way to the journey. It's not the destination, right? It's just part of the journey on the way, and so you have to keep going beyond that to get to the knowledge so that you can actually have some, serenity, happiness, to be able to be in the midst of all this chaos and say, it's okay, because I know how to learn, and every day I learn a bunch, and the next day I learn even more. And once you have a method that you can use consistently as a habit, you take away that habitual time that keeps us all away from being wealthy in mind and body, not so much superficial Federal Reserve dollar wealthy, but that's what they want. They want control of your attention and your habitual time. And if you don't know any better, well then, there's plenty of things today to distract people. For the few people who do know better or want something better, we create media so that they can fill their mind with healthy and nutritious content. And it's not about telling you what to think, it's about showing you how to think.
Just to wrap it up here quick, tell us, anybody out there, any viewers that can find more of the important work, which is what I like more in general about your work, is more of an intellectual revolution, a revolution of the mind, as you mentioned earlier, where they could find your work, websites, podcasts, anything they...
Before I say where you can get it, let me say a word about it. I discovered that one of the ways that they control us is through giving people short attention spans. So a lot of my work, especially my podcast, it's there to elongate your attention span. It's there to direct you to primary resources and quality partners who are doing likewise research with integrity. And so, when you encounter a 10-hour podcast, don't shy away from that. Say, I can chew that off a half hour at a time while I'm taking a jog or driving to work or whatever. It's about reprioritizing your time and then putting something healthy in that place. Instead of watching, some movie, some pay-per-view movie, going to the movies, watching TV, any of this stuff, ask yourself, what do I have a year from now from watching those 20 episodes of whatever series? Nothing. But if you actually took the time to program yourself and actually unprogram yourself from the slave mentality that we've all been groomed to have, this servile, subservient, non-questioning nature, that's not how America was founded. They went to revolution over a small percentage of tax, and what we have today is actually worse than the monarchy. I'm not advocating slavery or monarchy or anything like that. I'm just saying something has been done to artificially turn off the immune system of individuals in this country, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, and we're going to publish media, and that's what we're doing right now. You can find our productions at tragedyandhope.com and peacerevolution.org. You can fly with us on Twitter. It's /tragedyandhope.
Anything else you'd like to say to wrap it up here quick?
I have a great deal amount of appreciation for We Are Change in general, but We Are Change Connecticut specifically because, there haven't been very many people in this state who have been, trying to do what we're doing. And it's a pleasure to meet at least one other person who is competent at asking questions and finding answers. So thank you.
Became motivated to write a book of my own because I felt there were certain gaps in his book, certain areas of history that weren't covered, and submitted the manuscript to the John Birch Society, which had been distributing his book. And they liked it, and we worked on it together.
My book is really a figure in a landscape. I sketch out the whole panorama of secrecy and security and punishment in the war on terror today. And there's a lot of analysis looking at the deeper meaning